Studio now with Jeremy Saland and Errol. Jeremy, I want you to react to what Ayanna was just saying there. What Maduro said in court, taking notes, asking if he could keep those notes, and the defense's argument that they had a real problem with the way this military operation happened.
Yeah, it goes back to what we've been saying all along about the concept that as the head of state he has immunity, that the government, the U.S. government, went in and, for lack of a better term, as he describes it, kidnapped him and brought him back to the United States for prosecution. I don't think ultimately he will win that argument. Again, he's here now, and that's the case is going to proceed within the four corners of that courtroom. But I would expect him to say that, and you also heard, although her stance has softened a little bit from the now, I don't know if she's the acting president, I don't know what her actual status is, but saying that he is the only president, say, I'm a legitimate head of state, and we look at that indictment, that illegitimacy, that comment or the reference to it repeatedly, that's the government's attempt to take it down and say this is why we have a right to prosecute and pursue these charges, because he was not a legitimate leader, and this is why we're here and we did it. That, in part, may not be in the thoughtful process, but in Maduro's head.
Yeah, and how strong is the prosecution's case here with these charges, again, that we had on the screen, narco-terrorism conspiracy, cocaine importation conspiracy? They have been pursuing this for a very long time.
You're talking, years and years and years of evidence that they presumably collected. And remember, I can't stress enough, it's a superseding indictment. That means the process has already started and there's been resolutions in some of the other matters involving other defendants in the other cases. So I would have to believe, though due process exists, and we can never forget that no matter your Donald Trump had rights of due process, so does this president, that the evidence is there and there's going to be some sort of conviction. I can't say, well, that will happen, but I'm sure the prosecutors are ready to go within reason because they did not expect and know that this arrest was coming when it did until they turned on their TV sets.
Errol, I want to talk more about the place that he is now headed back to now that this court hearing has wrapped up, and that is the Metropolitan Detention Center, an infamous detention center plagued with a lot of issues and a lot of famous defendants, including Luigi Mangione. Jeffrey Epstein was there as well, including Sean Diddy Combs. What kind of conditions is this, as he says, the Venezuelan leader or the illegitimate Venezuelan leader, what kind of conditions is he and his wife facing here?
Well, look, it's a crumbling place. It's old. It's not well cared for. They've had problems with infestation. They've had problems with food. They've had problems with not controlling the temperature in ways that actually became life-threatening. Under certain circumstances, there have been federal judges who have intervened and been quite critical of how that place is run. That's what they're in for the next few months at least. This is not necessarily going to be the worst of their problems. They got a lot bigger problems than the lack of comfort. Although Celia Flores, the wife here, who, by the way, is not simply Maduro's wife, but was, in fact, the president of the National Assembly, the legislature in Venezuela for 5 years. So she's part and parcel of that government. She is reportedly dealing with some medical issues that came up in the course of being extracted and brought here, that she says she needs some examination. She's got some pains. She's got some problems. The MDC is the last place where you want to be sick and actually get some care. On the other hand, a lot of attention will be paid to the conditions of these particular defendants because it's an international case. There are people going to be watching literally in every corner of the globe.
Again, there is so much that is still yet to come, so I almost hesitate to ask this question. But the military operation, the fact that they got him out, the fact that he is now here in a courtroom, is this going to be a success down the line of the Trump administration's agenda?
Unclear. I mean, look, this is in some ways the easy part, meaning it's a successful operation. There were no U.S. casualties, although there were dozens or scores of people who were killed in Venezuela. But now, we've seen this happen before. Afghanistan was supposed to be a quick operation, and it turned into the longest military engagement in U.S. history. In Iraq, remember, we were supposed to be greeted as liberators. That certainly turned sour over the years. For people who are older, this was talked about repeatedly after the invasion of Grenada in 1983, after the extraction of the Panamanian president in 1999, and you can go all the way back to Vietnam. These things have a way of really going sideways because not all of the variables are under our control. And you're talking about a country that is twice the size of California. If you laid it on the U.S. map, it would stretch from Washington, D.C. all the way to Chicago. And it's got 30 million people, some of whom are really quite unhappy about what has happened.
And I would just add, too, when you talk about success, the initial claim here by the president and the administration is this was about drug trafficking, and this is about to stop the influx of drugs. First it was fentanyl, then it changed. when you hear and you pay attention and you see that the founder of Silk Road, who was the dark web selling in narcotics, gets pardoned, when you look at the president of Honduras for hundreds of thousands of tons alleged conspiracy for trafficking cocaine into the United States, gets prosecuted in the same courthouse for 45 years in prison, he gets sentenced before a jury of his somewhat peers, obviously it's the United States, and the president pardons him. This was never about drugs. This is not about drugs.
And Errol, what does it say, for what could come next, right? We as Taylor mentioned, we have heard the president talk about Greenland. We've heard him talk about Colombia. We've heard him talk about Cuba. How significant is this on the geopolitical stage?
Oh, no, it's very significant. Listen, during the first impeachment of Donald Trump, Fiona Hill, who was a high-ranking State Department official, said under oath that she perceived the beginnings of some kind of a deal between President Putin of Russia and Donald Trump. That notion being, hey, give us a free hand in Ukraine, and we'll give you a free hand when it comes to Venezuela. It's a troubling sort of a geopolitical dynamic that's getting a lot more attention to see how real that might actually have been. We also have in the Wall Street Journal reporting that a delegation of 20 businessmen are preparing to go to Venezuela to look for investment and business opportunities in March. And so, this was about a lot of different things. It wasn't necessarily about drugs. It's about a president who's pursuing policies that he's kind of said kind of clearly are commercial interests. And to the extent that they're pursuing commercial interests in a country where there's been a lot of destabilization, there's a lot of regional questions, there's a third of the population that has already fled that dictatorship, some of them want to come home. There's going to be a big international conversation. It's not going to, the simplest part of all of this is behind us now. Everything from here on gets complicated.
Right, and I would imagine, there are so many other orders of business to take care of. This is certainly going to be top of mind for everybody across the country. I mean, of course, other news will happen, but this is something that the president and his cabinet and members of Congress are going to have to figure out how to deal with now, moving forward.
That's exactly right. And they're going to be, I can't emphasize enough, there are going to be a lot of different voices. My folks, my grandparents are from Trinidad. It's a lovely place. It's right off the coast of Venezuela. They have turmoil and conversations going on there. A number of Latin American countries have already signed a note of complaint. There's going to be emergency meetings in the United Nations as people try and come to terms with this.
All right, we are going to take a quick break. We have much more coverage coming up. Thanks for staying with us here on New York One News All Day. We'll be right back.